Funny how I get to this year's Halloween game sequel, but neglect last year's totally. Probably because a copy of Parasite Eve 2 would run me about $120. The Suffering, the Ties That Bind, is the direct sequel to the first game, it coming out just a scant year after its predecessor. Ties That Bind came to consoles in North America on September 26, 2005, and to Windows PCs just 4 days after. This one, however, was not given out for free by the US Air Force. The Ties That Bind picks up pretty much directly where the first game leaves off, though you do get a prequel segment that takes place years ago in East Baltimore Correctional Facility, which helps to highlight this Blackmore character that seems to be at the center of Torque's problems.
Looks like trouble.
Holy fuck, Torque can talk now? This actually took me completely off guard. Torque this time out is voiced by the late great Michael Clark Duncan, though Torque himself doesn't speak much once again. The character who does speak quite a bit, though, is Blackmore himself, this time making an actual appearance in the game and voiced by...
I'm a last-minute entry, and now I'm playing this game.
Michael Clark Duncan. Blackmore this time out also serves as a dark side voice in Torque's head instead of that monster one from the previous game.
We're gonna kill your brother!
Hurry, T.
Let him
That
solve
man
his
needs
own
you.
problems.
Gee, I wonder if that's a hint at anything. Story-wise, Ties That Bind starts with the flashback that I mentioned, with the prison breaking out into a riot and Torque running into the malefactors he'd encounter in a major way just 5 years later on Carnate. Flashing forward to the present time, after escaping from the island, Torque is picked up by the soldiers of a mysterious organization called the Foundation. Torque is strapped down Hannibal Lecter style and wheeled through the Foundation's base of operations in Baltimore. Torque is brought before Jordan, the apparent leader of this band of soldiers, and a woman who is very interested in Torque due to his connections to the malefactors, which are her life's work. To what end? I'm not entirely sure. Reading around seems she's on a quest for power and immortality. I'm not sure how the malefactors can be tied into that, but okay, sure. While you're face to face with Jordan though, a cataclysm hits Baltimore and the compound itself, knocking the lights out completely. Jordan in some regards skedaddle, leaving Torque alone with some soldiers, who meet a sudden demise, and Torque is freed by his inner monster once again. Now free, Torque arms himself once again with a pipe and a pistol, and heads out to his old apartment at the behest of his dead wife. So, what's new for the game this time out? Well, a lot, actually, even though Ties That Bind came out just a year later after the first. The arsenal's way bigger now, blowing up the 14 weapons from just 6 in the original. The only weapon missing from the original is the flamethrower, which I guess was a constructed weapon, so does it even really count? On top of that, the revolver has been upgraded to essentially a magnum status, which is pretty awesome. You also have scorpions, grease guns, sawed-off shotguns, grenade launchers, RPGs, and there's even an M60 now, so you can go all John Rambo over your foes. However, now you're restricted to carrying only 2 primary weapons, unlike the first where you carried every weapon you found without issue. You can, however, carry whatever 2 you want in any combination. 2 melee, 2 ranged, 1 melee and 1 ranged, whatever you want. My personal favorite arrangement was shotgun, 2 shotguns. Ammunition counts are a bit lower this time out too, so you'll find yourself swapping out your guns decently often, or at least one of your weapons while you keep a primary one that you really like. Oh, I almost forgot, the mounted M50 also makes a return, but this time it can overheat. Tangentially, the M50 sequences from the first game also returned because those were just oh so much fun. Definitely not padding at all. Torque now also has a default melee attack that he can do any time. It doesn't do as much damage as a regular melee weapon like a bat or a knife, but it's something you could bust out if you get caught reloading and you want your enemy to back off for a second while you load a fresh magazine. Power weapons like the shotgun definitely feel like they have way more punch this time out too, while machine guns feel way weaker, unfortunately. Every one-handed weapon can also be dual-wielded as well, even the magnums and the sawed-off shotguns. Thrown weapons are totally the same though, except dynamite is no longer available, which was it even really needed with the shrapnel grenades in existence? I don't think so. Morality also makes its return, as does Torque's insanity mode monster form, but your monster form will have a bit of a different appearance based on your karma, with a good karma beast looking more like Torque and an evil karma Torque looking more inhuman and insectoid. In addition to this cosmetic change, you'll also unlock a bevy of different attacks that are inspired by the malefactors, in addition to your default slashes and ground pound, obviously. For instance, a good leaning Torque will have burrow chains at level 1 karma, followed up by trigger man guns at level 2, an isolationist blast at level 3, and at max karma has a room clearing explosion that only affects enemies. Most startlingly though, the biggest change for the Suffering that Ties That Bind is... Torque has shoes now. But really, the biggest change to the ties that bind is Zombium is no longer stored in your inventory and popped at will, instead being reduced to just being items in the world you pick up immediately and use. Torque can also take way less punishment this time out. I don't know what happened between his time on Carnate and now, but Torque practically has a glass jaw. I don't think the Malefactors are doing more damage this time out, or maybe I was just crutching on having Zombium being on tap, but I barely ever used Zombium in the first game. I needed it constantly in the sequel. It might also be that in addition to fighting Malefactors, you'll also be dealing with the Soldiers of the Foundation as well, who predominantly are using grease guns, which can tear you to pieces pretty quickly if you're not being cautious. Some also pack a riot shield, which needs a high damage weapon to get rid of before you can actually finish them off too. Foundation soldiers have auto-aim, which is pretty annoying to deal with, but thankfully they aren't too smart otherwise.
Oh god, our battle plan to come out of the door single file 1 by 1, low on weapons, isn't working! We're getting gunned down bad! They've been up my face!
Could also be that a chunk of the new Malefactors are also ranged now. How many were ranged in the first game? Just the marksman, and occasionally mainliners would throw something at you? Oh yeah, Malefactors. Let's talk about them now, since I love the first game so much. There are some fresh faces here, alongside some familiars from the first game. Returning Malefactors have had their backstories adjusted to fit Baltimore's rough past, though, instead of Carnate's. Returning first are the Slayers, of course, just as ugly and bladed as before, but now representing violent knife crimes in Baltimore. Mainliners are back, but kind of look like gross little humans now. They definitely don't look as cool as they used to. I think it's the lack of needles in the eyes, personally. Mainliners now simply represent drug usage and addiction, as well as the bevy of fatalities that result from that. Marksman returns the main ranged Malefactors, though this time they apparently represent when Union troops were sent to quell uprisings in Baltimore all the way back in 1860. Though I'm not sure how well that tracks, since marksmen now have glowing red goggles and still have the M1 Garand sticking out of their backs instead of, I don't know, a bunch of Springfield muskets instead. Do have the blue pants at least. The last returning Malefactor is the Burrower, which now represents the Irish workers who died during cave-ins while constructing Baltimore's underground tunnel system. Baltimore has an underground tunnel system? All of these classic ones sport new looks too, so it's not like they just copy-pasted them as well, obviously. Jumping out as the new Malefactor, but replacing an old one, essentially, is the Arsonist. Victims of being burned alive, the Arsonist represents the many fires that break out and destroy swaths of Baltimore's abandoned buildings, taking many of the transients who are squatting inside with them. There are two people fused together, too, which makes it all the more horrifying. Then comes the Gorger, which represents either death by starvation during the Great Depression, or cannibalism. The cannibalism aspect of this monster being related to an event in the past where a local priest, wanting to feed the members of his flock, fed him the only meat that he had available.
Where'd you get this from?
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
My God, it's people. We trusted you!
We had to be something, my friends.
Gorgers also have a special grapple attack where they very aggressively attempt to French kiss you. Police brutality actually gets two separate Malefactors. Goody goody. The Triggerman being the first, it looking like a bunch of policemen corpses sewn together like some horrifying quadrupedal flesh golem. These fuckers are the most annoying new enemies in this game, since they have guns for all ranges, including the shotgun for close encounters that knocks you right on your ass. Even worse, Triggermen are one of the Malefactors in this game that have a captain variant, an even stronger gun-wielding golem. Whee! Oh yeah, captains are back. Slayers have them, Arsonists have them as well. Bigger, badder, do more damage. I don't know why every Malefactor doesn't have a captain variant though. Seems like a no-brainer. New to captains, though, is now they can only be killed by Torque's monster form. Kinda awkward, since Torque's monster form begets him no additional defensive buffs or regeneration of any kind, meaning you're running into the fray of monsters just as vulnerable as you would be if you were normal Torque. Just minus the guns for the most part. Better hope a Triggerman doesn't take you to pieces before you can even get to him. Also representing the big PB are suppressors, though these Malefactors specifically represent the Enforcer COs at Eastern Baltimore Correctional Facility, and their rather brutal methods for keeping the inmates docile. If they catch even so much of a glimpse of you with that flashlight head of theirs, they will instantly ventilate your ass with 4 Tommy guns. And lastly, new for the common Malefactors are the Isolationist, prisoners broken by solitary confinement in Eastern. They're a lot like the Festers from the first game, except they shoot roaches instead of rats. All in all, a pretty solid new cast overall, I think, but I feel like some of the newbies might ape a little too much from their predecessors. Or maybe there's only so much you can do with atrocities, I don't know. Oh, there is also a gigantic Malefactor called the Horde, which represents urban rioting and violent civil unrest. It really only amounts to a kinda boring boss battle, though. So it's just there for looks and to occasionally block Torque's progress through Baltimore. You'll encounter these malicious monsters all across the dirty streets of Baltimore, though most of these places seem fictitious, unfortunately, as opposed to being based in reality. All of the locations throughout Baltimore, be it the poverty-stricken streets, the movie theater, the tenement housing, and the Eastern Baltimore Correctional Facility, are incredibly depressing and dreary. It honestly feels like, well, real-life Baltimore. Or rather, any city that's suffering from urban decay and has a history of atrocities associated with it. Once again, I think the atmosphere surrounding Torque is pretty well done. They knocked it out of the park, again. You might also be curious, since the last game had 3 major ghosts following you around all the time. Does this one as well? Well, of course it does, but only Killjoy returns, him serving as your ever-friendly psychiatrist once again.
Such a fragile thing, the human mind. Hardly takes any effort at all to make it snap. You see? Quite sad.
Now there's 2 totally new damn souls following you around. First is Copperfield the Slave Hunter. As his name implies, a slave hunter from Baltimore's past who sends human-headed dogs he starved to attack you constantly. Dogs who have some very janky hitboxes, by the way. Opposite of him is the Creeper, real name Luther Stickwell. The Creeper is a fat-balling incel with a penchant for murdering women, particularly the prostitutes under his employ as a pimp. Is that the proper term for a pimp-hooker relationship? He taunts and attacks you with his 3 favorite kills that are now sewn as part of him. Alongside those 2, you'll also be constantly haunted by the visions of your dead family once again.
Here. I'm right here. Y'all float down here.
And by the ghosts of atrocities past. In reality, though, you'll be harassed by both Blackmore and Jordan, too. Them being the real villains of the story, obviously. Blackmore, due to him bringing Torque into the criminal underworld, with him constantly calling it
The game.
And Jordan, due to her obsession with the malefactors and Torque's connection to them. Friendly humans will also aid you once again on your way. Or you'll just butcher them without remorse if you're an evil son of a gun. But once again, I gunned for good karma, so I rescued and aided every one of these unfortunate souls that are trapped here in Baltimore. Your friend Miles is a constant throughout the game, being there for you since your time at Eastern Baltimore Correctional Facility, and he'll help you through your modern-day troubles as well. I aided Hejira, an old friend and neighbor of Torque's, as well as crack addict Kyle, who, with his drug-fueled delusion, thinks Torque is his father.
Oh, no way. Pops? Oh, what the fuck you doing here?
Interestingly, you'll also run across Consuela Alvarez, wife of Ernesto from the first game, and avid tragedy scrapbooker. She also can slang a Tommy gun, just like her husband. You'll also meet Elroy Jr., son of the warden of Eastern Baltimore Correctional Facility, who is trying to get out from under the sins of his father. Elroy Jr. is similar to Dallas in that he makes constant musical references too, though all of his are metal band related as opposed to just Wu-Tang.
Now that's a display of power!
You'll also be introduced to Rance Sherman himself, the fellow that's been writing those notes that show up on the loading screens in both games. The last major NPC you encounter is Riley, a very Irish Foundation soldier who has decided to betray Jordan and Blackmore and help Torque find Blackmore at Eastern. Riley's probably my favorite NPC.
Blood fucking everywhere! Jeez, I just want a day off!
You and me both, my friend. A quick aside, NPCs in this game are way more durable than the previous, so you can worry less about them dying in combat. What you need to worry about instead is friendly fire, because Jesus Christ, I'm pretty sure Consuela and Riley combined killed me as much as the malefactors did.
Unit captain?
But ain't one man's truck fucking had it with this! Can't fall down, pick it up, can they?
Riley escorts you to the location of Blackmore, and you end up finding him in the drowning pool. If you're of good karma, though, you'll also have to fight Jordan along the way, and she'll attack you in a helicopter. This boss battle kinda sucks, since, well, it doesn't seem obvious at first that you just have to shoot the damn thing with whatever guns you have. They also cock-tease you with a 50 caliber machine gun up top that you feel like would be the thing you have to use to beat a helicopter, but only she gets to use it after she gets out of the chopper. You shoot her helicopter down, she runs to that 50 cal turret I mentioned earlier, and then you kill her. No fanfare whatsoever for her. I just kinda blew her up, truth be told.
I don't partner with losers.
After that, you'll face off with the Horde like I mentioned earlier, and then down into the Drowning Pool for the climax of the game, and goddamn what a challenging climax this is. The Drowning Pool is a brutal gauntlet that encompasses multiple waves of malefactors. It ain't an all-slayer cakewalk, that's for sure. You go from them all the way up to Isolationists, Weapons are scattered throughout the drowning pool, on top of a limited amount of zombie too. You'll need to slaughter every wave of them, obviously. What I do like here is that in between waves, Killjoy forces you to reflect on the major NPCs you've encountered and their eventual fates. I like this since I feel like the survivors in the first game weren't really reincorporated well. You just kind of saved them, then you never saw them again. Not even a parting reference to them. I'd like to know if like Dallas and Ernesto got away, you know? If you manage to survive the Malefactor Gauntlet, your karma will then grant you a boss fight versus either Copperfield if you're a good boy, or the Creeper if you're evil. Not really sure what the dichotomy is here, since both of these men are completely reprehensible characters versus Horus and Hermes. Horus was at least a somewhat sympathetic character who realizes the evil he's committed and he wants Torque to overcome the influence of Carnate, versus Hermes, who's a complete fucking degenerate. And well, I don't understand why you would fight the Creeper or Copperfield if you're evil. If anything, if you're good, I feel like you should fight and kill both of them. I don't know. Either way, you're facing a boss at the end of this brutal gauntlet. Copperfield in particular is pretty hard since he has his squad of dogs constantly hounding you. That on top of him using a high-powered rifle and no-scoping you the instant he shows up. After that nightmare, you'll find your way to Garvey's Children's Home, the orphanage Torque grew up in, and it's here that the biggest twist of the game is revealed.
Those blackouts, they're when I get my time. Get your body. Everybody else who knows Blackmore thinks I look like you. Because I am you.
Blackmore is Torque and takes over his body during the blackouts. This twist is actually so poorly kept, you can see it coming from basically the start of the game. These two really shouldn't have shared voices, it made it way too obvious. After this, you engage in a final climactic battle against Blackmore, the Horde, and a bunch of Slayers. A climax that I ended with one Cataclysm in my monster form. I didn't even get to shoot Blackmore with my RPG, it was kinda anticlimactic, truth be told. Face to face with his biggest demon, what happens now is based on your karma once again. If you're good, Torque will destroy Blackmore, finally freeing himself of his evil influence. Carmen's spirit arrives thereafter, says the line,
The ties that bind us.
and her and Torque are never apart ever again. If you're neutral, Torque and Blackmore remain stuck in a power struggle, neither gaining sole possession of Torque's body. Which, kind of a shitty ending, truth be told, since it makes the whole game nearly pointless. You went through all this bullshit just to not get rid of him? And if you're evil, Torque is banished and Blackmore is now fully in control of the body. Additionally, if Jordan is still alive at this point, it'll be revealed that Blackmore's tapping that ass too. You're given the credit roll, no prequel mission unlocked, and that's the ties that bind. You can also look at the history too. They've got multiple journals talking about various locations and the monsters once again. But what do I think? Reflecting on it a bit, it definitely feels like developers wanted to ratchet up the survival tension quite a lot. Torque having lower health, ammo being more limited, and zombie no longer being untapped means that things are way more tense in combat, and you actually have to keep your wits about you as you progress to the streets. I remember them trying to change things radically too, to attempt to create a more survival horror-y game versus a straight action one. A lot of reviewers complained about that, hell, even I did too, and it seemed like they took that criticism to heart. The twist for the game though was way too predictable. It's easily seen as early as chapter 1 when Torque first speaks. It's a fine plot beat, but it wasn't a big reveal like at all. If you're gonna do something like this, I feel like you need to be more subtle with the storytelling, like Knights of the Old Republic, for instance. Ties That Bind's pretty fun to play though, so I definitely don't feel like I wasted my time going through it. And the world building, once again, is super nice. I like all the little extra stuff like journals and notes you can read. Sad to say this is where the suffering ended though. I think it'd be nice to see a return to this series, though. These creature designs are great, and they really shouldn't be left to rot in the Midway Vault. There was supposed to be a movie based on the suffering as well, but that never materialized, obviously. Perhaps someday we'll see a remake of the first game, though. It's a rough gem for sure, something that's enjoyable, but not perfect by any stretch. Anyway, though, as always, I'm HadesManticore, and this here channel is City State Manticore. I definitely hope you enjoyed my double review for Halloween this year. Tell me your opinions of the suffering and its sequel, The Ties That Bind. Or just leave your favorite horror game in the comments and talk about it. Leave a like too to help my channel grow, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.